People who cut off their family, what did they do to you? U/Lovelixgarskastal responded. Grew up in an explosive and abusive household. When I was finally able to move out, I started slowing distancing myself. Mom went off the deep end. Started out accusing me of sleeping with every single person I know. Yes, every person, coming up with outlandish stories for why I was an awful person, threatening suicide. When I cut her off completely, she started stalking me. I changed my number and moved to a new state. I did not give anyone, including my brother, my new home address, and started receiving cards in the mail from her last year. U/psychological dog 757 responded. My mother used to beat the shit out of me on a daily basis. Lashed out for no reason than me being a child. Woke me up in the middle of the night to give me cold showers because I did something she judged to be out of line. It was really BS reasons most of the time. Put my face in garbage full of maggots because I forgot to tie the garbage bag before putting in the bin. Mind you, one was still a child. She always did this when no one was home, and I was so afraid to say anything that my sister and dad didn't know it was happening until I told them a few years ago. I'm 29 now, with BPD, PTSD and anxiety because of all of this. I'm still struggling with all the emotions I lived during my childhood. To this day, she still doesn't understand why I don't want anything to do with her. She still calls my sister to get her to convince me to get in contact with her. My sister hasn't nagged me with this since she found out what happened. Now I'm living with my GF, who is the most wonderful and loving person ever. I'm glad I don't live in fear anymore. Edit. Whoa, this really blew up overnight. Thank you all for your kind words and support. To the person suggesting therapy, don't worry, it's already going on and I have a psychiatrist. BPD is borderline personality disorder, and no, it's not genetic, well mostly. Mine was developed through repeated trauma. Argarant, thank you all for the love, it really warms my hearth. U/Jubjub0527 responded. I cut out my mother's side of the family. Her sister and brother made it their personal goal to financially ruin my parents. Then the other sister piled on. All three of them had been borrowing money from my grandparents for years, and when the other sister sold my grandparents' house out from under them because they can't live on their own anymore, my grandparents were appalled when they were told by my aunt that she was putting them in a home. So they lived with my parents instead, and the other siblings accused my parents of taking their inheritance. They harassed, stalked, and vandalized my parents' property until both grandparents were dead. I will never forgive them and hope their own children treat them as poorly as they treated my parents and grandparents. U/Catrocksteady responded. I cut out my entire side of my mom's family after her funeral. I was 17. Her family had always been a difficult bunch. My mom had a stalker at the time of her death. He claimed to the family he was her fiancé. And they believed him over me. Despite the restraining order and proof of abuse, they chose that man over me. So I cut them out. Them only contributing a $100 donation to the funeral costs really helped that decision also. She had 3 birth siblings and 12 adopted siblings, several aunts and uncles and cousins, and they came up with $100. Fuck that and them. That was 8 years ago. Last I heard, her stalker spent Christmas with them. So my choice feels validated. U/solid question 3952 responded. My sister cut me off when I asked if she was engaged. Apparently it was incredibly rude and I ruined her engagement. The reason I asked, her and her boyfriend were taking a big trip. We had talked for months about the possibility that he would propose on the trip. 2 weeks before they left, he showed her the ring he bought her. On the trip she posted a picture of a dinner and she had a big shiny diamond on her left ring finger. But I'm the asshole for asking. Edit. I have no idea what the logic behind this is. Why whole family can't figure it out. But let me give you some context. I have a social media account but never use it. Like ever. Her and my brother were having a pretty heated debate. My husband asked a pretty neutral question trying to clarify something she said. He wasn't a part of the conversation. She started insulting him, blocked him and blocked me, who wasn't part of the conversation nor had even been on it in years, but she still has my brother who was the target of the heated debate. U/deleted, responded. My uncle and aunt whom I lived with from the age of 15 to 19. They always treated me as an inconvenience even though they're the ones who suggested I went to live with them. They had me clean up after them and their kids. They got mad at me when I ate too much of their food, caused me to have stunted growth and an eating disorder. Made fun of me for being depressed and always discouraged me from doing any type of extracurricular activity at school because they didn't want me to make their kids seem like mediocre losers. They overshared family secrets with me and basically made me feel like I had to share those same resentments towards other people in my family in order to be welcomed into their home. To this day, I still have trust issues with everyone in my life and I rarely allow myself to make new friends. U/infinite backspace responded. My dad died the day before Father's Day. She who birthed me openly disregarded every one of his final wishes, up to and including the place of burial. Since then LVE gone full scorched earth. Never mind the years of physical, psychological, and financial abuse meted out to the both of us all our lives. I was prepared to forgive her up to that point. For him. No. She called my father weak for not making his wishes known to her, and stated that mental illnesses were a hoax, a crutch for the weak. I informed her right then and there that I was no longer her child, and she can rot in that miserable mausoleum she calls a house. I am organizing a proper memorial service the way Dad wanted. I've also been making covert trips taking everything of sentimental value from Dad's upstairs apartment when she hasn't been home, and I have opened a separate bank account preparing for the day she dies. I have Dad exhumed and buried in the place he loved and wanted. I will make everything right that she has wronged, mark my words. She is dead to me, and anyone who stands with her is an enemy. The Canterbury nun responded. I had a baby when I was 16. Because I was so young, I had to continue living with my parents along with the baby. When I turned 18, my parents encouraged me to go off to college and said they would look after the baby while I was gone, and then I could have my child when I finished school. Of course, I visited my child all the time, but my parents and my sister started a smear campaign against me, stating that I was a terrible mother who abandoned her child. I knew things were being said, but I didn't realize it came from the people who were closest to me. I didn't really find out the level of cruelty until I finished school and wanted to resume care for my child. My parents got a lawyer and threatened to make my life hell if I didn't walk away. I was broke, young, and naive, so I walked away. It's one of the biggest regrets of my life, but I cut them off. I had to for my own sanity. My child and I have a great relationship now. Despite everything my parents did and the lies they told to keep their grip on my child figured it all out on their own. They realized the truth. Amesbyxx responded. I cut off everyone in my father's family after I came forward about him abusing me sexually for years. My uncle suggested it was a bad dream. My grandmother said it was normal for a man to get erections at his daughter. That's not all he did in the slightest. My auntie told me to go to the police so a mob wouldn't come to him, and then helped him leave the country to stay at her house with her 2 young daughters, and his father defended him and tried to convince my mother to meet my father in person. He would have hurt or killed her, no doubt in my mind. This man horrifically abused me and my family only to be defended tooth and nail. It hurts not seeing my little cousins, but if LD rather go blind than ever have to see my father again. On the brighter side, since cutting him out of my life, I've moved in with my boyfriend, who I was dating in secret and helped me to come forward about what my father was doing. LVE grown closer than ever with my mum and visit her as often as I can, and Ivy got a fucking dog now. I was never allowed dogs, and now I have a beautiful border collie named Sky who I adore. I've never been happier, and even though I am still very mentally unwell, even suicidal often, I am in a much better place. It really does get better. Stiffer than a boner responded. I copied this from another post that I commented on. I haven't had contact with my mother since I was 7. I cut contact with my dad and my grandmother when I was 19. I'm now 28, and I can say cutting contact is one of the best decisions I ever made. My mother kidnapped me from my dad when I was about 6. Beat me. Let her friends beat me. Gave me 1 meal per day. When her and her friends were bored, they would restrain me to a chair and force feed me. They'd stick a heaped spoon down my throat, and the spoon again my throat was painful. My mother waterboarded me. She dumped me on her friend, despite knowing that her friend's daughter repeatedly molested me. The daughter was in the same class as me, and assaulted me at school too. After being abused for a year or so, she lost custody of me when I was about 7. Deleted, responded. Locked me in the basement with no food, no electronics other than a CD player, no outside communication at all, just the same books I read over and over again, including but not limited to Sexual Homicide, Patterns and Motives by John E. Douglas, and Burgess, and Robert Ressler. This started at age 13 until I ran away from my father and stepmother at 14. I'm currently polite to my mother because I'm financially dependent on her, but once I'm not, I'm cutting her off as well. She sent me to conversion therapy when I was 16 and not only refuses to apologize, but she also said she'd do it again. Strongish Ninja responded. While I haven't initiated any cut-offs from my side of the family, LVE just not felt like accepting the olive branch after 20 years of no contact. My wife and I mutually cut off her mother and stepfather after her mother repeatedly came over to watch our children and was on Facebook the whole time, making our oldest do everything for her sister. The final straw was when they asked to take both children to a Christmas party, forgot the 2-year-old until they were almost in their car, and proceeded to berate the 10-year-old when she pointed out that it wasn't a little mistake but was in fact a big deal. They then changed tactics and tried to make her feel like it was her fault for losing her sister. We made it to their apartment before they did, grabbed our kids and haven't seen them since. Slippery Banana 8 responded. My grandpa was crushed in a farming accident. He was still alive, but had been pinned for hours under the equipment. When he was found by a family friend, my uncle and mom were called and arrived during the process of getting free from the equipment. My uncle begged the EMTs and firemen to let him die in the field and told them what a piece of shit my grandpa was to them. For reference, my grandpa and grandma, past years prior, had spoiled each of them, and neither of them ever had to work hard a day in their lives. The uncle was upset that grandpa hadn't given him some land and hated helping him with chores. Grandpa's still alive, but the mom and uncle are dead to me. Coconut Greek yogurt responded. I have 2 aunts who make everything about themselves, from family barbecues to other people's birthdays to funerals. Just don't have the energy for that. My grandmother has always been shallow, but after my grandpa died she started bullying me about my weight, and the last straw was when she told me it was a shame I couldn't have bothered losing weight for my wedding. I had done intermittent fasting for months and only lost 10 pounds due to the stress I was under, but regardless, her commentary about my wedding wasn't that I was happy or beautiful, but that I was fat. My sister has tried to kill me or convince me to kill myself my entire life. She's ruined or tried to ruin every connection I have, whether it's family, friends, romantic interests, or teachers' professional connections. Tried to break up my marriage with the sole reason being that her boyfriend had broken up with her and she didn't want to be single and hurting while her sister was, at the time, happily married. The boyfriend was and is a friend of mine and she openly admitted to stalking him, and it got so bad that he had to change churches to avoid her, and move to the other side of the state briefly. U/Gage302 responded. Mom and dad killed my dog, they live on a farm, begged for her because she was an Australian shepherd and belonged in a farm. She was great and happy for a couple months. Fast forward another couple months, my wife and I haven't seen my parents on about a month, and in passing they mentioned she had gotten sick but is doing great, that they took her to the vet and everything is fine now. And we would see them and the dog the following week when we go to the beach as a family. Approximately 2 days later I see a picture of her in the background of one of their horses and she looks off. I call my parents and say what's going on. They say she's not looking good and won't make it to the beach next weekend, so I get up, drive 3 hours, go get the dog. My wife takes her to the emergency vet that night while I stay with the kids. They drain 10 pounds of fluid from her stomach. She has multiple portosystemic shunts in her liver. Found out my parents took her to the vet, told the vet it would be too expensive to treat her, $1,200. We end up spending about $10,000. They were unable to save her in the end, but said if treated earlier it wouldn't have been a problem. My mom and dad tries to gaslight my wife and won, scolding us saying it our fault. Partly is for letting them take her. Never asked to see how the dog is, or even made it. Now they haven't tried contacting my children, or I, for the last 1.5 years. There's more to the story and everything, but I doubt anyone made it this far. U/Ninja Chickdog responded. My mother was living with her mum after I moved out of home for a few years. The opportunity came up for her to buy her own home. Grandma had given my mum her inheritance early to help with deposit of the house. Long story short, as soon as mum moved into her house, she abandoned grandma. Doctor's appointments that were arranged, mum just failed to show up to take her. Still not sure why she completely betrayed her, but at the same time she also blocked her sister. Mum has no interest in patching things up and she seems to think she's owed the apology. There was a bank account set up where it required both mum and my aunt's signature to get the money, and multiple attempts have been made for grandma to get the money so she can get new hearing aids, but mum will not sign. I think what she's done is downright disgusting. I nearly disowned her during the heat of this. Fuck her. U/well_hi_there_1991 responded. Not me, but my BF cut off his whole family except his sister, and her status is pending. His mom was super homophobic, and she threw a major tantrum when he took me to meet her and threw us out of the house. His dad, parents are divorced, told him a bunch of awful things over the phone about how he'd rather have my BF be dead than gay. As soon as he hung up the phone, my BF started crying, and that's been the last time he talked to his father. That's how bad it was. His sister is fine with us, but every time we see her she's really weird and flirty with me. It makes both my BF and I really uncomfortable, so he's asked her to stay away until she can handle herself. It's pretty fucked up, but luckily they live in a different state. My family loves him and have basically adopted him as their own. I think they like him more than me, lol. Overall, it's pretty tough, but he's working through it. If you're a parent, or one of your family members is gay, part of the LGBTQ community, don't be an asshole, please. U/Cancer for the Cure responded. My dad passed away in 2004, he was 46 years old. Heart attack. He came home from work at 3:30 p.m, we were back from the hospital at 9 p.m. with him pronounced dead. I was 13, my brother was 15. We never loved my dad's family. We never looked forward to seeing them, and there always seemed to be no fun had with them at cookouts or parties. I'm sure the sudden death had a lot to do with it, but after he passed I became hyper aware of how his family treated my mom, who is the strongest person I know. 2 examples. First, my dad's parents lived across the country, and instead of boarding their dog, made us delay the funeral by 2 days so they could drive. Apparently boarding your dog for a while or being there for your grandsons was an easy choice to make. Second, an aunt of mine, while opening a check my family received at the funeral from my mom's lifelong best friend, remarked "Wow, must be nice," in reference to the money we received to help us survive for a couple months. Cut them off months later. It's been nearly 20 years, and it is one of the best decisions I ever made. U/JGSS 2018 responded. Had to cut off my father and his mom. My father got all the character traits from his mom that made him a real shitty father. He would beat me and my brother, insult us, psychologically torture us. I always got it the worst because I was his favorite and his image since I looked like him after being born. He personally spent most of my life bringing toxicity and drama to every aspect of it. And when I became an adult, he played off the abuse as normal fatherly things. Even joked about it to my face about, "Man, I used to whoop you so bad when you did blank." Finally cut him off when my son was born, just couldn't bear the thought of my son growing up with a shitty role model like him around. And his mother was pretty much the same way, a real old school is the only school type of stuff. But I more of cut her off because she was dramatic and wasn't a part of my life since I was a child. Always skipped over me and my brother for our cousins and nieces and nephews. But yeah, just real lousy pieces of shit that I had to cut off to ensure my son's well-being. U/Monsterfecker 3000 responded. I barely remember. My brain cut out most of my childhood because of trauma. I remember that my dad was abusive and manipulative. He would call me screaming through the phone telling me what a horrible kid I was. This was a few times every week. He would shower me with all of these gifts that I never asked for, and he would use it against me every time I spoke up about not liking the abuse. He drank in the car a lot with me in it. He got extremely drunk when we went out to a restaurant and would make me be the designated driver when I was 15 and had my learning permit. One of those times it was in the middle of a serious storm and I had to drive us home. I hydroplaned and nearly had a head-on collision with a pretty big truck and we nearly got killed. He lied about everyone around him when he was mad at them, and I caught him in those lies multiple times. Some of these lies were things that could get them serious criminal charges and ruin their entire lives. I recently learned that I'm a product of rape. If that's what I remember when I barely remember anything, then I wonder what kind of bullshit I don't remember. U/Death by Chainsaw responded. The last time my mom's side of the family had their yearly family cookout, I decided to go with my fiancé. I usually avoid my extended family because they have a history of being overbearing, but I wanted to give them another chance and introduce them to my fiancé. For context, we're in a queer relationship. When we pulled into the driveway, there was a Confederate flag hanging over it. We almost turned right back around, but my aunt saw us and flagged me down. My partner and I are both very skittish and non-confrontational, so we tried to just be polite, say hello to everyone, grab some food and get out of there ASAP. Every single member of my family decided to ignore that I explicitly introduced her as my partner. They kept calling her my friend. Then my uncle took a pink balloon away from my 4-year-old nephew, drunkenly exclaiming it would make him gay. We got the fuck out and I haven't seen any of them since. U/Mariah Mine responded. I was diagnosed with brain cancer and as a result, had surgery and radiation. A few days before my radiation, my partner of 6 years dumped me. My already estranged father used this as an opportunity to come care for his daughter. What he actually did was come to town from out of state to leave his wife for another woman. He used my illness to leave his wife for another woman. Additionally, he was a racist. He posted hateful memes and photos all over his Facebook, specifically against immigrants. My now husband is an immigrant and came to the US as a child. My father insisted he had a right to see our daughter when she was born. I wanted to remind him she was the daughter of an immigrant, and so when he posted photos about feeding immigrants to alligators as border control, he was talking about his granddaughter's father. He died before I could ever waste my breath. I'd say those are the top 2 reasons, but I have a list. U/Elijah_Rosenbluet responded. That would be a story too long for a post, but the final drop was a disagreement about very strong antisemitism and them finding nothing wrong, even finding it funny, with a t-shirt saying Auschwitz land in the Disney font worn by a fascist politician in Italy. If we can't even agree on this being wrong, and a lot of other important basic moral or political points, then there is simply no reason to keep contact. I'm tired of trying to explain to grown-up people, who even have the history persecution and murder through the Nazis on one side of the family and Nazis on the other side of the family, why it's important to care for others and protect them. Edit. There was a lot of things that went against me and lot of neglect, but that was somehow okay with me. The part that I couldn't tolerate is the one that goes against others. U/Meat Vice responded. My paternal grandmother gaslit me and told me my vivid negative memories of her son were false, and if I just stopped listening to my mother's vindictive narrative, LDC he was a good man. He threw me across the room for wetting the bed as a preschooler. I hid behind the couch while he beat my half-brother's mother. He told me the only thing he could ever give me was his last name, then tossed me off of a platform when I dared to call him daddy. My mom was carefully neutral when I was little, then shared some stories as I got older. She recalls me getting in the car after my last overnight visit at 4 years old, looking her dead in the eye, and saying I never want to come here without you again. Kids don't say shit like that without reason, but my grandmother insisted it was all made up. I was 19, he was dead, and she couldn't let me be. I told her there was nothing positive for me in our relationship anymore. She screamed, called me some horrible things. We haven't spoken in the nearly 2 decades since, and I honestly can't tell you a single thing I miss about her. U/Glafira responded. There is a lot of reasons and a lot of members. My brother is a POS, tried being there multiple times but he just doesn't care nor anything. Then turns back and to whoever says that I'm his competition and that I fake being nice. I've long understood he is a narcissist as well as my mom. And nothing is salvageable and I can't keep placing myself as the sacrificial lamb anymore. No contact is the best piece LVE obtained in my life. 2 of my aunts tried to obtain an inheritance that was for my cousins who lost their mother due to cancer. Both made my cousins fight each other and they were going to place one of them, that had the most money, into a psych ward and make a guardianship. Yeah, fuck them all. Edit. That is just the surface. Most of my life has been abuse at home and bullying at school. Now I'm adult, I have my own peace and made my own tranquility with no revenge. Because my best revenge is being good and okay for me by myself for myself. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. Leave your own stories down below, I would love to read them. If you would like to see more videos like this, please like and subscribe, it helps me out greatly.